I'm going to show you why your first $50,000 can feel ordinary and still change your whole life. You sink into the seat, and one thought cuts through the fake calm smile. How am I still sweating this if I am supposed to be doing okay? That sting matters. The first real pile of money often starts working in rooms that still make you feel small because it changes the pressure on your next choice before it changes the look of your life. Your first $50,000 is where a bad month stops turning into a bad year. And this page is about to show why a number can change your life long before it looks impressive. Look, this is not financial advice. I'm just showing you the facts. The manager is being polite in that trained front office way that says they want an answer before you really get your bearings. You look at the number. It is not cartoonish. That is what makes it nasty. It is just high enough to rearrange your month, and just ordinary enough that you are supposed to act like grown adults can absorb a hit like this without blinking. According to a 2025 Federal Reserve report, renters were more likely than homeowners to not have all their bills fully paid the month before. In that same report, 21% of renters said they had been behind on rent at some point in the past year. That is about 1 out of 5 renters. A lot of renters who sound fine in conversation are already closer to pressure than they look. The renewal sheet turns a vague feeling into a hard number. What makes this scene so maddening is that the number does not arrive like a disaster. It shows up dressed as a routine update, a small increase, market conditions. Nothing in the language admits what the page is really doing, which is testing how much room you actually have. And that test feels personal, fast. You can spend years building money, then one lease renewal lands and makes all of it feel fake. It makes you wonder whether the balance counts at all until it changes the outside of your life in some obvious way. Maybe you have built real savings. Maybe you have been more careful than anyone knows. At some point, you crossed into a number that used to sound huge. This office still smells like old carpet and printer heat. The folder on the desk is still beat up at the corners. Nothing about this room makes you feel ahead. You know what makes that sting. Nobody teaches you to read money this way. People teach you to spot upgrades, a louder apartment, a shinier car. They do not teach you to notice the moment your cash buys you the right to slide the pen back and say, "I need time." Cash changes the next decision. That line matters here because the first big pile of money usually shows up in a private moment like this. No applause, no photo. Just a page, a deadline, and the question of whether pressure is about to choose the next year of your life. So, the first $50,000 can feel weirdly small when the biggest monthly bill in your life is sitting in front of you. You are comparing a quiet kind of power to a loud kind of lifestyle. Loud usually wins that comparison, even when quiet is the thing that actually saves you. The room has not upgraded itself to match the number you worked for. Your office chair is still plastic. That fake smile is still fake. The page is still asking whether you can absorb another year of this without flinching. So your brain starts grading your money with the dumbest test possible. You feel that insult almost immediately. If this balance really mattered, why does this room still make me feel average? I call that the visible rich test. It is the habit of judging money by what other people can see instead of what cash lets you refuse. In 2005, economist Erzo Lutmer matched people's answers about happiness with earnings in the areas around them and found that, even after accounting for their own income, higher earnings nearby were associated with lower self-reported happiness. If the money does not change the outside of your life, your brain tends to mark it as smaller than it is. That office has not changed, which is exactly why the buffer feels invisible. The money is real, but the room keeps arguing with it. This is how people underrate the first serious money they ever build. The number may already be doing an important job, but the job is private. Nobody in the parking lot can see it. Nobody across the hall can tell that you are a little harder to trap than you were last year. A neighbor can roll up in a cleaner car and trigger envy in 10 seconds. Your emergency cushion does its work later, when the lease is in front of you and you do not have to sign on the spot. That distortion is expensive. It can make you feel behind while you are actually building the first layer of safety that changes real outcomes. Someone with louder stuff can still be one ugly bill away from panic. Someone with quiet cash may look ordinary and have far more control by Thursday afternoon. And that hidden job is bigger than most people admit. Early wealth usually buys breathing room first. It buys the right to pause. A day later, that pause can turn into a better choice. A week later, it can turn into a different year. Nobody claps for that. Your friends do not text congratulations because you can wait 3 days. There is no social medal for not being cornered. But there's a catch. They look at the outside of their life and say nothing changed. The kitchen is still old. The couch has not changed either. Even the trip they imagine never happened. Then they miss the real upgrade, which is that the scary conversation is no longer a forced march toward the least bad option. The visible rich test treats money like a costume. It wants proof you can point at. Real life is harsher than that. The question that matters in this room is whether you can refuse a bad deal or absorb a hit. A little later, that same cushion may buy enough time for a better option to become usable. Right now, sitting in that chair, you do not feel rich because the scene has not been upgraded. There is no luxury here. There is no proof. That is exactly why the balance gets underrated. Then the person across from you says something that sounds harmless. You can always look at another unit or another building. For half a second, that sounds like freedom. Then the next page shows up. There is the application charge, then the security deposit. After that comes money due before move-in. The monthly rent is no longer the whole story. It is just the number that got you to look. You think about it while the page fills up. Wait, I need all of this before I even get the keys? A 2023 paper in H. Hood's Cityscape Journal examined Craigslist rental ads and the move-in fees landlords mention. The point was simple. Upfront costs like security deposits, advance rent, and application fees can change which units a renter can realistically afford. Leaving a bad place is expensive before it gets cheaper. Now the desk is holding two prices, the rent, and the cash you need just to leave. And notice how the order works. Deposit now, application now. You are paying before anything gets better. Then the truck. The cheaper monthly arrives later, after you have already survived the expensive part. That changes the whole calculation. A unit across town can be cheaper every month and still be impossible today. The savings shows up later. The pain shows up right now. Monthly rent gets all the attention because it is cleaner. Upfront money is uglier. It comes in chunks. It arrives before the relief does. That is how the smarter move can feel impossible, even when the long-run math is better. This is why people get stuck in places they already know are wrong for them. They are staring at the bill for freedom before they ever get to touch the savings. One fee can block you before you even apply. Then, a deposit jumps in front of you. Then the first month wants to be paid before the old place has stopped taking your money. You may need a truck. You may lose work hours while you move. Power and the internet want their turn too. Those side costs end up deciding who can leave. Once you see that gate, the first $50,000 becomes the pile that handles the ugly front-loaded part of changing your life. Without that pile, even the smart move can feel reckless. With it, the smart move at least gets a chance. A lot of money advice talks as if a lower monthly number automatically solves the problem. That is fantasy. The lower monthly number matters only after you get through the front gate. So people stay put in bad apartments, bad roommate setups, and neighborhoods they were already trying to outgrow. The better option asks for cash before it gives relief. Think about how insulting that is. You can be completely right about what needs to change and still be unable to act because the first step costs cash. The monthly may be lower. The building may be safer. None of that matters if you cannot cross the front gate. Early money changes mobility. It pays for the awkward, expensive moment before the improvement starts paying you back. And the desk is still there making that point in the most irritating way possible. The circled rent looks like the decision. The decision is actually being made by the costs hiding beside it. Now carry that forward a few hours. You are home. The renewal email is open. There is a deadline in bold. Your cursor is floating over the e-sign button. Your phone battery is low enough to make you irrationally angry. The room is quiet in the worst way. You feel it in your jaw. I hate this price, but I need this settled. Thin cash can make speed feel worth overpaying for. In a 2013 science paper, Manny and co-authors found evidence in this direction. In one study, they had people think through financial problems. In another, they tested the same farmers before harvest and after harvest. Performance on the cognitive tasks was worse under tighter financial conditions, and the authors suggested that financial worries were consuming mental resources. When cash is thin, relief starts to look smarter than math. That is why the pen starts to feel like pain relief. What happens next is easy to miss because it can look responsible from the outside. You stop asking what fits best over the next year. You start asking what will end the stress before bed. That shift is expensive. A bad rent increase turns into a signed renewal. A deadline gets mistaken for clarity. Certainty, even ugly certainty, starts looking mature. And the worst part is that this can happen while you are technically doing better than before. Your income may be up. Your savings may be up. You may be miles ahead of last year. Then one hard conversation lands at the wrong time, and suddenly the old fear is back in the room, making decisions. I hate how often normal life rewards the fastest answer instead of the best one. Pressure loves deadlines. A deadline can turn a weak deal into the only deal that feels adult. Sign now, settle it, move on. Later, when the money leaves your account every month, the urgency is gone and the overpay is permanent. The first 50,000 can feel ordinary in the exact moment it is doing real work because the job is emotional first. It is trying to buy you calm. Calm is a terrible performer. It does not sparkle. It just prevents bad decisions from dressing up as necessary ones. There is another twist hiding under the lease question too. A lot of the time, the better option is not available right this second. It starts later. A new job begins in a few weeks. A roommate move-in is next month. The cheaper place across town is open, but not until after your current lease forces an answer. Often the scary part is the gap between now and then. You look at the dates on your phone: start date, pay period, move-in window. The numbers do not scare you one by one. What scares you is the empty stretch between them. You think it clearly once the adrenaline drops. I can handle the move. The gap before the next check is what scares me. In a 2019 field experiment with Teach for America, Kaufman and co-authors randomly increased transition funding and found that most applicants did not respond to a modest bump. But applicants with the highest financial need were more likely to join when they got a little more money up front. A gap between paychecks can trap you even when the better option is right there. At the desk, everything narrows to one brutal question. Can you afford the empty stretch before the next check? This is why the better path can feel out of reach even when you can see it. The fear lives in the blank space between the plan and the next paycheck. That is why the paper feels different once you have cash. The monthly rent is still real. The hassle is still real. But there's a catch. Once cash can carry the gap, the deadline stops deciding for you. That is the moment people miss when they judge money by appearances. They imagine the first big balance should feel rich because it ought to upgrade the visible parts of life. Better furniture might come later. A nicer neighborhood may eventually happen. At first, though, the real power is less glamorous. It carries the hallway between one chapter and the next. That hallway is where people get cornered. A lease ends before payroll arrives. A job offer starts after the old one stops. Meanwhile, a better apartment saves money over time, but the deposit lands before the saving does. The hidden value of cash is that it can stand in that ugly little gap and keep panic from choosing for you. That is when the number starts turning into control over your own future. No sales language needed. It is simply time that belongs to you instead of the deadline. And once time comes back into the scene, your standards come back too. You stop accepting a worse apartment because it is easier. You stop treating a rushed answer like maturity. Suddenly there is room to ask one more question, read one more page, or sleep on it one more night. What matters is the next choice your cash can change. That choice might be a lease. It might be a job. Sometimes it is simply the ability to say, "Give me 2 days," instead of signing because you are out of room. Once the gap is covered, you hear the leasing office differently. "We need an answer today." Stop sounding like the voice of reality and start sounding like what it actually is, which is a preference from the other side of the desk. That is a huge shift. The problem stays real, but the panic premium attached to it is gone. And once you see money that way, the first 50,000 stops looking like a disappointing version of rich. It starts looking like time to negotiate, time to recover, enough time to survive the handoff into a better setup without wrecking yourself on the way there. It also changes the tone of the conversation. When you are cornered, every option feels like a threat. Once the gap is covered, options start looking like options again. That matters more than people realize. A pressured person is always asked to decide faster than the facts deserve. Cash slows the clock down long enough for judgment to do its job. Now, another screen lights up in your head. Maybe you open your accounts. One balance looks respectable. Maybe 2 do. There is retirement money. There is money invested for later. On paper, you might look solid. Then you look at what can actually land in your checking account by Friday. You feel the insult all over again. A respectable total is sitting there. But Friday only cares about the slice that can actually show up. That scene matters because money that cannot reach the problem in time does not change the decision in front of you. Money that sits in the wrong place can make you feel accomplished and helpless at the same time. It can raise the total on the screen, then leave the actual deadline untouched. In CFPB's 2017 report, Financial Well-Being in America, Based on a late 2016 national survey, adults with more liquid savings, meaning money held in cash, checking, and savings accounts, tended to report higher financial well-being. The same was true for adults who were certain they could come up with $2,000 in 30 days. Those were among the strongest descriptive relationships in the report. $2,000 in 30 days is deposit-sized money. It is truck rental money. It is the gap between a final paycheck and the next one. The leasing office only cares about money that can show up on time. But there's a catch. This only works when the money can reach the problem fast. That is the part people miss when they talk about wealth as one giant blurry number. Some money is built for later. Good. Keep building later money. The freedom in this scene, though, comes from money that can move this week, without a warning screen, a penalty, or a few extra days of delay, while the deadline keeps breathing on your neck. That is why a person can look better off on paper and still make a trap decision in real life. A strong retirement balance does not help if the lease answer is due tomorrow and the deposit has to clear before the weekend. An investment account that needs time, taxes, or a market sale to become usable does not do the same job as cash that is already standing by. People miss this because totals feel powerful. A total can make you feel accomplished for a second. Deadlines care about arrival time. One person can cover the deposit before the office closes. The other is still waiting on transfers and hoping the deadline moves. That detail changes the whole scene from theater into control. The visible rich test will always push you toward theater. It wants the number that sounds impressive in conversation. It wants the kind of wealth that feels adult because it sounds large. The real scene is much more blunt. Can this money solve the actual problem before the clock runs out? If the answer is yes, everything changes, even if nobody else can tell. If the answer is no, the feeling of wealth is partly decorative in that moment. Pretty maybe, useful, not yet. Go back to the desk now. The renewal form is still there. That pen is still there too. But it does not feel like pain relief anymore. It feels like a choice. Your shoulders are lower. Your voice is calmer. You slide the paper back across the table, and you are no longer trying to end the fear as fast as possible. The job now is to make the right call. The room opens up. I do not have to take the least bad option today. According to a Federal Reserve report, 37% of adults said they wouldn't be able to fully cover an unexpected $400 expense with cash or its equivalent. That is roughly 4 out of 10 adults. The same report found that 55% had set aside money for 3 months of expenses in a rainy day fund. That leaves 45% who had not set aside that kind of buffer. One ugly surprise is still powerful enough to rearrange life for a huge share of people. That is why the first real cash pile does its best work quietly. The real upgrade happens in private. A blown tire can do it. So can a medical bill. Sometimes it is just stupid timing. That kind of hit no longer gets to run the next 6 months. The paper goes back across the table because panic no longer has a vote. Every choice does not suddenly become easy. Rent is still high. Moving is still annoying. Jobs still come with trade-offs. The difference is that the hard part stays hard without becoming a trap. That is a massive change, even if it does not photograph well. Maybe you renew after pushing for something better. Maybe you buy a week and keep looking. Either way, it is your call now. You may even walk. The power is that fear is no longer the only voice in the conversation. That is what people miss when they ask why the first $50,000 does not feel rich. They are looking for evidence in the wrong place. They look at the outside of life and wait for a costume change. A nicer car might happen later. A better watch might happen later too. What matters sooner is private. You stop being forced into expensive yeses. You stop paying for urgency with the next year of your life. The first money that matters rarely announces itself. It shows up when rent jumps and you are not automatically cornered. Then the meaning gets clearer. A move asks for cash before it saves cash, and the answer is no longer decided by fear. A little later, the same pile covers the empty stretch between one paycheck and the next. That is when the cliff turns back into a calendar. That is why I do not judge early wealth by how rich it looks. I judge it by how many bad decisions it can prevent. Subscribe for Money explained where the pressure actually is, and send this to someone who thinks they need to look rich before they are safe. The visible rich test tells you to ask whether anyone can tell. A better question is whether you can refuse. Can you refuse the lease renewal that only feels safe because the clock is loud? Can you refuse the job you would have taken only because it starts sooner? That second question lands harder because it reaches into your actual life. It asks whether one hard week still gets to choose the next year for you. Your first 50,000 can still leave you in a boring office with ugly carpet and a pen chained to a desk. It can still leave you driving the same car home. The view from the sidewalk may look almost unchanged, and it can still be the line between pressure running your calendar and you running it. That is why the number feels ordinary right up until the moment it saves you. Real money changes the next call you have to make. When people say they want to feel rich, they usually mean they want the outside of life to look different. Fair enough. Most people have been trained to notice proof they can point at. The first serious cash balance gives you a different kind of proof. First comes pause. Then actual options show up before a deadline hardens into a commitment. After that, the handoff between one version of your life and the next stops feeling like a cliff. It will never look flashy. It wins anyway. Because a rough month turns dangerous when it gets permission to choose what comes after it. When cash can stop that chain reaction, the whole year starts looking different. So, when your first 50,000 does not make you feel rich, read that sensation carefully. It may be a sign the money is working in private, not a sign that the number is small. It means you are meeting it in the exact place where real money does its quietest, best work, at a desk, under pressure, with a page in front of you, and finally enough room to decide like your future still belongs to you. That is a private upgrade. It will not win a room. It can still save a year,